Team, this is such a special episode. I got to briefly interview Pamela Rothenberg and Gautam Gulati, otherwise known as Dr. G, who are the founders of the podcast Superhumans. I was a guest on their show, and we are sharing that episode here on Trust the Journey. What we talk about is how they came up with this show, what this show is, and sort of helping you understand, because it's not a typical podcast. It's a really special thing. So I invite you to check it out, superhumans.health, and really enjoy this whole experience.
Melanie Curtis, Jason Maletsky. Big goals, deep work. Love, fear. Being human. Learning to live in alignment with our values. On the path to our full potential. Trust the journey.
Here we are, Pamela, Dr. G. You guys, I am beyond stoked to have you here. I am like, this is a special episode because we're going to be kind of setting the stage for sharing the episode that I did on your show, Superhumans, which, team, for those of you listening, this show is off the charts. It is so moving, so powerful. And I'm excited because basically we're going to talk about how you guys, I want to hear how the show, even the inception of the show, how you center your get, like all the things about how you create this show. And I kind of want to leave it to you guys. Where would you start in helping people understand what they're about to listen to?
Well, I mean, first off, Mel, I mean, this is such a special conversation for us because Pamela and I have been talking about, how we've created the techniques and the approaches, to the show, but we've actually never gone public with it. And so This is sort of a behind the scenes look, and thank you for this opportunity to share what it led up to your episode. And even beyond that, what these episodes mean to sort of the human experience. And so thank you for having us here.
You're welcome. I'm so into this because I really do want more people to find your show because it is that special. And so, Pamela, what would you add to that?
Honestly, I feel like I'm still like feeling into just the space of being with you. So let me tap in real quick just to like who I feel like is here, because I love that you say like team, and I always get excited when I'm like, I'm in Mel's team, and then to think that I'm surrounded energetically by a whole audience of people who feel like they're a part of your team. I'm actually gonna cry. So honestly, I mean, I'm so thankful that you said that you want more people to find the show. That means so much to my heart. And one of the things that comes to mind with that is I think it shows that when two people really, or not just two people, but when any person or group of people devote themselves to something passionately, and devote to the quality of the craft, that thing will have its time when it's meant to have its time. And so as Gautam was saying earlier, we're coming up on like the 5th year or so. And I'm just really grateful that you're helping Superhumans get its time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So to your question, Mel, I mean, the process of the show is elusive to us at the beginnings as the conversation unfolds when we're having that conversation with the superhuman themselves as a guest. When we started it, we didn't actually know where this was going to go. And the original title of the show was To Whom It May Concern. And after a number of conversations and a number of meetings, and we've got this whole laundry list of where should it be. And ultimately, it was all about the individual that we invite onto the show. And we call it Superhumans because it really is about the vulnerability of the guest showing up. And it's not an easy thing to do. And so it's truly sort of a compliment of courage for the individual to show up and share their personal story. And what we realized over time is that the human experience is not a point in time. It's messy,
Yep.
right? It's a story over time. And so we had to figure out, like, how do we essentially capture the essence of somebody's story without it feeling like it's performed or something. And then oftentimes the individual doesn't know or can't see their own story. And so really it's an uncovering process.
Yep.
And one of my favorite ways to describe it is actually a way that Pamela often describes it, which is we're putting together a puzzle and all of us together on the conversation, and yet nobody knows what's on the cover of the box of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And so our job in the conversation is really to sort of collect all of the pieces and figure out what ultimately is that universal truth of that story that the people who are listening can also relate to. And so that was really, I mean, it took us a number of hours and hours of conversation to really unpack this and figure out what's the best approach and how are we not duplicating other types of storytelling methodologies and really creating our own signature model around it. And we're happy to dig into that, but that's kind of, it was a little bit of a mystery ourselves in terms of putting the show together.
I want to quickly touch on the courage piece, because this, as for the sake of the conversation today, I'm the guest. And whoa, the reason I want to double tap on this is because I have a lot of experience being witnessed publicly, being in a space where I am live, but it is rare. I don't think I've had ever experienced this before Superhumans, to really surrender and give yourself and your story and how it is told over to someone else, right? Like personal brand, melaniecurtis.com, tons of experience controlling my own narrative. And so that, to me, as someone who very much stands for courage, stands for bravery, I felt very much in alignment with my values, and certainly grateful to be selected to be on the show, but so in alignment with my values because it felt so brave to do this with you guys. Even though I totally trust you, it was still a real surrendering and a real letting go to trusting you to tell my story and share me in a way that I could ultimately be proud of, which I'll stop there, but very, very special experience. Pamela, I want to hear more about that, right? Because I want people to understand, what did we experience together before, like, how does it actually occur? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's, I think, let's see. Whew, it's fun to like get taken back into it. I think also, guys, between you and me, and I know that everyone's, you don't have to cut this. I'm just telling you, between you and me, my brain will like be in such the energy of where or you can cut it, such the energy of like enthusiasm that it's like I hear the question and then it's gone. But okay, now it's back. Now that I just, okay.
Pat, it's so, that's crazy. Look at this. What does that say there? Poem between you and me. And this is a poem I wrote for Superhumans, and I found it in the archives. And I was like, oh my God, you look this is how things manifest, right? Like,
I know.
It's literally called Between You and Me.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the thing. I think the thing that's challenging in a way to even discuss this is there's so many processes within the processes of what Gautam and I have done together. And honestly, I have to say, like, the first thing is just honestly just the magic of us meeting. Like, I remember telling my friends, and I'm going to cry, but I remember telling my friends about this show, and it was just like, honestly, if I backtrack all the way back, it's like I bought my friend a ticket to a conference, a podcast conference I had no intention of going to. And then that person bought me a ticket back and was like, oh, fuck, I didn't want to go to this. Then I'm there. And like I flew from Austin. It was in Florida. Like I'm there. My friend's bringing me around. He's like, let's sneak into VIP. And I was like, whatever. He found someone who brought us in. And then I meet Gautam and I'm just like, what a cool name. And then he's telling me about this mission, right? To empower people to make better healthcare decisions. I saw a light bulb go off above his head and I was just like, please, for the love of God, include me. Like, just, and so he was talking to me about the different producers he's interviewing, people at NPR, all this stuff. And we just had such a kinship. It's just like immediate family, immediate. You know, you talk about soul family, soul tribe, like Gautam. And so we then just went on this thing of like, I felt like, here's a visionary. He has a vision. And I want to help be an executor of this vision. And then my heart just grew 10 times bigger and 100 times over with every step of the way where we're crafting, you know, oh, well, how can we take care of our storyteller? Let's do a meditation. Let's get them in their body. Is the show called Between You and Me? Is it called To Whom It May Concern? Like, we made a list. Like, we have a list somewhere that probably has like over 100 names. I mean, we were going through all of this. Gautam was talking about, you know, when we talked about audience, who is this for? We're like, how do we Trojan horse the most like, the most like alpha or like, you know, you talk about doing brave stuff and people who are so busy, and we were like, how do we Trojan horse people who are so productive into crying? Like, you know, just,
Yeah.
so there's so many processes, I think, that are in it.
I mean, to ladder all that up, I mean, thank you, Pamela. That it truly does bring back some amazing memories. But story is really, you know, the healing, you know, a healing medicine, right?
Yes.
We like to say story is medicine, or sometimes story is a form of medicine is kind of like a little bit of our tagline. And to some way, you know, as someone who's a doctor, like, we prescribe stories as a form of medicine. And your episode is exactly that, right? I mean, it really is, you know, healing many of the individuals who listen to the story. And so we have sort of a way of trying to uncover that without telling the listener, and they'll get it once they listen to your episode, without telling the listener what they should be taking away. Because the whole idea is that we allow people, we give them permission to see themselves in the stories told by others, right? And so your story, while it may be specific to you, has lots of relevance, no matter whether they've been in the same situation or not, lots of relevance to their own particular lives, depending on how they unpack it, right? So it's like a good piece of art. Your story that you tell and you share and that your listeners are going to hear is like a really good piece of art, because you leave it essentially to the individual listening to the story to see how it relates to them. And that's the most powerful art, in my view.
Yeah, stories as medicine, so true, both for the teller and again, being witnessed in this way, being seen deeply, being known deeply. Like, those are core human tenets, you know, like when we are seen and we are known in a deeper way, whether we're in a one-on-one conversation with a good friend or a therapist or a coach or whatever, or we're being really honest in a setting that feels safe, even though it's shared more widely, that is a healing experience. This definitely was a healing experience for me. What I think is fascinating too is that when you talk about like me telling my story, team, again, those of you listening, this was not a sit and record for 45 minutes to an hour. This was like multiple hours of like, they helped me drop into a meditation, and then I just start talking and see what emerges from my being, from my soul, from my heart, from my heartbreak. Just all of this amazing, like, humanity that they help the person connect to by how they hold the space. And that is just incredibly powerful as an experience, but I think also important to note that it's not just any other podcast. I want that to be very clear.
Well, I think, as Pamela likes to say, it's an audio docuseries.
Yeah.
Right? It's narrative storytelling. So yeah, it's thank you for identifying it as that. But it's just interesting that you talk about sort of the lead up, because what most don't realize is there is the episode, and there's multiple hours of tape that essentially get, you know, crafted into a 35 minute episode.
Yeah.
But there was a lesson that I had learned, and Pamela and I had basically unpacked it and made it even better. But it's a lesson from interacting with this famous photographer named Platon.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we were talking about our interview style and how do we uncover story and how do we get the individual to talk more, because you don't hear our voice on the episode, right? We're no part of the episode except sort of behind the scenes,
Right.
which is, somewhat unique. And so how did we make ourselves invisible into the storytelling? And so it was funny. I had this chance of meeting Platon, and I asked him, I was like, listen, we're all holding these little phones in our hand, and yet somehow you're able to capture the essence of an individual that no one else can. And he had told me, he said, the difference between what I do and what everyone else does, everyone else sits there and waits for to capture the moment. And he goes, I do my homework enough that I know exactly how to create the moment, and then I'm ready to capture it. And so we took that as a learned lesson, Pamela and I, we unpacked it. And so what most of our guests, and this might be new to you as well, we probably knew more about you than you ever imagined that we knew about you going into the episode. And so we do our homework, we study, we look at all the different breadcrumbs.
Wow.
And then we try to craft, like, what is that magical opening question that's going to get you into a headspace where we disappear for 2 hours and you're inside your own head.
Pamela, you're saying you're crying. I'm crying now. Now I'm like, oh my God. It's like, again, back to that, like, being known. I'm just like, holy shit. What? It like feels to me like love.
Yeah.
It feels like love because I believe it is. Like you guys, anyway, that's special. But yeah, Pamela, go ahead. The sponsor of today's episode is Great Spirit Farm. Yes. Love having Great Spirit Farm with us, and specifically their Ayahuasca microdose tincture. It is a natural MAOI antidepressant and anti-anxiety. Great Spirit Farm describes the feeling as a warm hug. It can help you access deep creativity, flow, intuition, and improve vivid dream recall, which actually has totally been my experience.
So what is exactly in the bottle is the ayahuasca vine itself. So this is a tincture extraction, double extraction tincture that contains the Banisteriopsis caapi vine. Now, the particular vine that this has been extracted from has been growing in Florida now for over 25 years. And the ayahuasca vine does not contain DMT, so that makes this tincture 100% legal in all 50 states.
Yeah, Great Spirit Farm recommends starting with 1 to 3 dropperfuls and increasing your dose gradually from there until you feel the effects. There are no known contradictions with antidepressants, and always check with your doctor and only take as directed.
And what's really great about what Great Spirit Farm is doing is they're making sure that 10% of all the sales are returned to the Shipibo tribe, honoring the medicine's indigenous roots with active reciprocity. Now, if you want to try this tincture out for yourself, you can go to the website that is ayadose.com, AYADOSE.com, and you can enter our discount code TTJ10 to get 10% off your order. Again, that's ayadose.com and all caps TTJ10 to get 10% off your order.
Pamela has a way of doing that for sure on the show.
I'm okay. I think I've hit my maximum of saying how intense I'm going to cry. So it's the third now at the max. I'll just cry.
The hug and the punch. You can describe that, Pamela.
Well,
keep crying. That's what Trust the Journey is about, anyway. So it's all good.
It's a funny though. I'm actually going to piggyback off of what you were saying, Gautam, about like the way that the question gets shaped too. Because one of my favorite things about this show is that Gautam and I are also like something is working through us. Like we are tools for the magic of this. So when we're coming up with the question, I mean, we're not using the part of our brain that can intellectually analyze a person or what they've been through or what the show needs or what our list. It's not strategic planning. It's okay, go take a nap And if the question comes to you, let me know. And if it didn't come that day, then we kind of just like, okay, well, the interview's in 2 days. Let's get on a call tomorrow and maybe it'll come to us then. And there's such a space of like us being held while holding the show as well, and
Yeah.
holding the listener in maybe a more quantum realm before we even meet. And when the question comes, it you know, if it came to Gautam and he says it, I'm like, oh, or if I got it and he hears it, he's like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it feels like when someone's naming their baby and they're like, yeah, I don't know, like it might be this, but I'm not sure. We have a couple. We'll see when they're born, you know. And we're like that, where, you know, we have you do one and you know, yeah, that one meditation. And then when you are in a space of feeling held by your own spirit, then we give you the one question that something else gave us, something we
Yep.
can't name. And then you guide yourself through your life. And we just get to listen. And we're like, are you serious? I get to just listen for the next 4 hours.
Oh my
And my
God.
favorite thing is like those moments when you look up and you're like, are you guys still listening? You're like, oh, they are. And then you're like, I loved when you would just kind of stop and say, ugh, this is such medicine. Because it let us know that exactly the intention that we had was happening. And I think that to me is like when art is really serving its purpose.
Yeah, it's so special. Man, I don't know about you guys, but it's not a typical experience for me that I sit and just talk for hours in a row and feel truly that I'm not being a burden. You know what I mean? And I'm saying that from the perspective of just how we are living in this modern society. People are busy, this and that, da 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 da. So there's something incredibly healing about that part of it too, which I genuinely believe comes through in what's ultimately shared. You know what I mean? And it's not something, again, it's not something expressed. It's not on the beginning of the episode, yo, check it out. Mel felt deeply loved and supported and seen, you know, before doing this. But that's what happened, to at least for me. I can't speak for other guests, but I imagine other guests would say something similar to that. But it's notable, right? Like, imagine, this is kind of a random aside, a story that seems parallel to this. When I was in sort of my early healing journey, back early on, post-divorce, I was missing being physically held. And I had this small trip that my best friend and I went to see our other best friend. And basically, I said to them, I was like, I know this is weird, but if you're willing, I would like you to hold me physically for 30 minutes. Like I know it's a long time. I'm not saying a 5-minute like snuggle sesh. I'm talking, I want to have this experiment and this experience with you, your arms around me for 30 minutes. And it was unreal what that delivered. Both I felt safe enough to ask them for it, but it also was like you got through the awkwardness and it allowed it. I ended up like bawling my eyes out, feeling so loved. It was, I mean, I could totally bawl even telling you this story, but I'm like kind of keeping it together. But that's, I feel like, similar to what the experience is, where you're obviously inviting me into that space, but there is something about not like genuinely feeling like this whole giant extra extreme level of space for you. It is that's what this is. So I don't know. I feel like that's really important to share because people won't know that otherwise, but that's definitely part of how I felt in what I ended up saying out loud in your presence.
I mean, that this is a whole episode right there. I mean,
I
I had
know.
to take notes on this whole element of I
I
didn't want to
know.
speak because I felt like you were going to be a burden to us. I'm like, oh my God, that is just mind blowing. Like I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Can we?
Yeah, and that's part of, I'm so happy to do this because I do want you guys to know what that experience was, and probably I would be interested to hear what other people's, reflections are on their experience leading up to their Superhumans episode. So anyway, I digress. Please tell me more.
What I'm curious, Mel, because we've never had this chance to actually ask you the questions. After the recording and between the recording and the episode coming out, what scared you the most?
Oh God, good question. Yes, I know. I know you had Dee, our friend Dee, on the podcast as well. And her episode also, I mean, every single one of them is incredibly powerful. It comes back to that narrative piece for me of like, oh my God, am I gonna look good? It's down to like basic fears of looking stupid, fears of being overly exposed, and fears of, how am I going to feel about what is out there? You know what I mean? So that like, it's like a deeper level. I'd say it connects almost to the emotion of humiliation. Like you're really being brave around how you are perceived and seen. You know what I mean? So again, was I that scared? No, I wasn't super totally like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. But yeah, there were days when I was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Well, what people don't realize is there were probably a dozen stories that we could have focused on or unpacked within there. And again, there's a whole process that Pamela and I go through in terms of uncovering what we think is going to be the most impactful universal truth. But I mean, that is a common feeling. Like oftentimes the mystery of the unknown between the recording and what actually gets revealed, because we're not, I mean, for those listening, we're not very transparent in terms of what to expect in the final episode.
Correct.
Ooh, it's interesting.
Which is fine, by the way, which is fine. But anyway, yeah, Pamela, go, please.
Oh, no, it's just fascinating to me because when we think about, like how you shared just now that story about wanting to be held, and then how Gautam was like, well, I didn't want to speak because it's almost like, oh, more stories, and I remember the first time that Gautam and I were doing a Superhumans recording, and we're showing up to our first interview. We have 4 hours blocked, and then a lunch, and then another 2 hours, and we had all this time set out. And I remember after our first session of the 2 that day with the same person, which was episode 1 with Mark Brand, Gautam kind of looked at me and said, did you see that part? When he started to get animated? And I was like, what? And he's like, he started to like act out like certain characters in the show. Like he's talking about his dad. And it was one of those things where it's like Gautam locked into something where it's, when someone, there's a difference between someone emoting versus someone telling us what they think versus someone, even there's a difference between retelling something or actually being in it. Like, there, and Gautam locked into this thing of like, oh, they were in that story. And there's moments like when you just shared about wanting to be held, it felt like you were there and we time traveled with you. And that's when like, and I get chills just now. That's when like, I feel like Gautam like unlocked the secret sauce there. He's like, oh, they took us in.
Yeah.
And that's really a big part of it.
Well, you guys, we could obviously talk a long time about this, which I would love selfishly to talk to you for hours and hours and make you guys talk for hours and hours. But what if you have to, here's a question before we like close and head into the sharing of the episode. What else have you learned from being with, because you have season 1 and you have season 2, like what have you learned over the course of, because again, Mark being the first person, right? Like I imagine you maybe grew in how you felt like you were, like how it was going, or, oh, this is going to be something that really works well, or let's try this? Was there any, how would you describe the sort of growth trajectory of you guys as this version of a space holder and this version of a creative?
Well, there's an evolution from the show perspective, and then there's also a greater understanding of humanity. And I think both have sort of evolved over the course of time. I think from the show perspective, I think for us, it came down to forgiveness, right? Because we got bolder and bolder. We started asking questions. And at some point, we're like, well, you have to look at like what's true to get people to want to listen, what's true to the listener, what's true to the guest, what's true to ourselves. And at some point, I think we had it was well into the number of episodes. We ended up reading Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, and it was just sort of this element of just let it go. It doesn't matter. Like, our job is to put what we think is the best piece of work out there and stop worrying about, well, is it going to resonate with this or that or this person, or does it offend here? And so I think that was a little bit of, from a production standpoint and direction standpoint, it allowed us to experiment with different ways coming into sort of the tail end of season 1 and into season 2. From a personal standpoint, from the humanity perspective, the evolution, I think it's just really, I think it just amplified this notion that the human experience is very fragile. And I think, the people that we've interacted with, all very different personalities. And Pamela's a natural at it. For me, it was a big learning process in terms of how to truly connect empathetically with these sort of different personalities. Like, I mean, it's in her domain name or in her handle, Pamela Listens, right? So that's her superpower. Yeah. And for me, it was a little bit of a learning curve to listen the way Pamela listens. But in doing so, just being observant, I think the fragility of the human experience and taking away our emotions, our judgment, any perspectives or biases that we came with, I think that's just transformed me as a human, and how I view the world and how I view other people's stories. And there's no right or wrong story. There just is. And that's what it is.
Pamela, what would you say?
Well, I got like lost in just like the poetry of the concept of the human experience. And I think one of the most beautiful things about this is it's allowed us to be witnesses of these, just like Gautam saying, the individuality of everyone's life, but how there's these certain markers, which is, one of the things that we talk about is, what is the universality? How do you say that? Universality in the individuality. And so in that perspective, it's like, okay, so I'll never meet someone who doesn't know grief. And I'll never meet someone who doesn't have a version of what love means to them, and a felt sense of that. And so all of these feelings it's universal, but the way in which that someone experiences that is individual. But going now, I'm remembering your question, which has to do with space holding. And I think, honestly, how has it evolved? I think one thing that was really helpful for us was learning how to secure safety for our storytellers, because you do come in with so much courage and bravery. And we have experienced the opportunity to hold people in their fear of, how am I going to be perceived when this goes out? And there was a whole learning curve around that. I mean, there were times where I'm not even joking, like on the floor crying, feeling like I didn't know how to take care of my storytellers. Yeah. And people would be like, are you okay? Do you need to quit this project? I'm like, no, it's my baby. Like, get away from me. But I allowed myself to like die into it also, and be reborn in the process. And I think one of the great things about collaboration is, I can go to Gautam and be like, here's what my neuroses is saying. What do you think? And he's like, well, and he can like pull out a little thing from like my blind side and be like, maybe this is. And so I feel like we take care of each other as we're trying to take care of the show. And that's really special too. Yeah.
I mean, story is the best drug we have, right? It's a prescription that keeps on giving. It's sort of dovetail what Pamela just said is part of the superhumans, those sharing their stories. That the story is not about us as the storytellers. It's not about you as the guest on the show. The story is about being in service to others.
Yeah.
And so it really is sort of the medicine that keeps on giving.
Yes.
And that's really a hard thing to swallow in terms of like, sometimes people may not like their episode, or it doesn't paint the best, most, picture of what their accomplishments and so forth, which we want out there, right? So it shows our dents, it shows our imperfections, it shows the reality, but I think that's what makes it most relatable to others as well.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh. Well, you guys, any final thoughts before we launch people into me? Me, but also us. Now, I love that people will have this understanding that it is, even though you are, to your point, invisible in the actual audio experience, you're so very, very present. It reminds me of this like photo art project that I did. Very long story short, I feel like it's so parallel, is I did this parachute thing in New York City. I chucked my parachute up and it opened up in this most perfect way. It's like a miracle photo and it's just me. But I wrote this piece about it when I have my skydiving thing on, and it's got all this embroidery and all that stuff. And I talk about, it looks like it's just me. But if you look closely, you can really see everybody who ever had my back, everybody who supported me, everybody, Irina behind the lens, my friend Shane carrying the stuff that day. You can sense that when you really feel into the artwork. And that's how I feel about this episode. So that's what I would say as a final thought. But what are your final thoughts before we send people into this adventure?
This is where I just love like the essence of shared consciousness, because I was just thinking about how this episode and all of the episodes wouldn't be possible also without our audio engineer, Rob Spate, who really feels into the show as well to make sure that musically people are carried. And one of the most beautiful things that people will hear is when Dr. G says, see you on the other side of the story. And the invitation there is to be changed and morphed in a way where you know yourself better than you did maybe 25 minutes ago. And the connection that you have with yourself is deeper. And I know that music is such an important part of the listening experience. And it's curated and crafted with someone whose intentionality matches the rest of the show. So I also just want to give like deep thanks to Rob.
Absolutely. Gautam, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say get ready to fly with Mel, because this episode is clearly going to take every listener on a healing journey. So thank you for sharing with us and being a superhuman.
Thank you both. I love you to the ends of time, that whatever that means. Thank you. You're the best. And okay, let's do this.
When was the last time you faced fear head on? And how did you react in that very moment?
Superhumans.
Superhumans.
Superhumans. Superhumans.
Superhumans.
I'm your host, Gautam Gulati, better known as Dr. G. As someone who once prescribed pills, I now prescribe stories as a form of medicine. Today's story, told by our beloved friend Mel, reveals how the wrath of fear can either grip you or set you free. It's a choice. It's your choice. So as you listen, think about how you see yourself in Mel's story.
So when I jumped and when I landed and I was not dead, and it sounds so ridiculous, it changed my psyche in a really irreversible way. And it's partly connected to how it helped free me from the chains of fear.
In the wise words of Nelson Mandela, courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the triumph over it. This quote, paired with the backdrop of our storyteller's vulnerable journey with the many faces of fear, has us contemplating the emotions dictating the internal narratives we tell ourselves. Who we become is determined by who we choose to hold the pen when writing our own story. Is it fear? Or is it you? Before we hit play, just a quick word of caution. This episode mentions the use of psychedelics, and it's why we want to give you a friendly reminder that our storyteller's personal experiences shared in this episode are for entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as professional medical advice. Always consult with a healthcare provider before embarking on any practices or substances that could potentially impact your health or have unintended risks, complications, or consequences. See you on the other side of the story.
When I was a kid, my parents got divorced when I was young, really young, about 3 years old. And I had the experience of visiting my dad, living with my mom, my stepdad, my stepmom. We had back and forth weekends. And I always remember feeling really afraid of my dad. He's, a strong personality. It's not that he wasn't loving as well, he was. But there was definitely a feeling of not knowing what to do, not being sure and always sort of being afraid I would get in trouble, just get in trouble. I was the youngest and I was the only girl on my dad's side of the family. And I always felt included for the most part, but I was slowly learning how to not be afraid. I was slowly, I guess, figuring out how to be in that space and slowly figuring out that my dad wasn't scary, which sounds weird, but that was definitely part of it. There was a very conscious thought as I entered my teen years and my young adulthood. I remember thinking to myself about, okay, my dad isn't scary. Fast forward, I can think about going back to when I was with the person who would become my husband. We moved to Arizona. We left and we moved. And we created a new life there. We bought a house, like the whole thing. We're sort of going this direction of all the things that you think it's supposed to look like. All of that was happening. And this is also while I was traveling the world at the height of my professional skydiving, really traveling 2 weeks out of the month. And it all was, coming together. And shortly after our sort of big wedding, our big, wearing the white dress, everyone's invited, big ballroom thing, my husband wakes up and he says, through tears, he says, "I don't love you anymore." And of course, I was like, "Oh my goodness, like what's wrong? Like, are you okay? Like something's wrong here." My immediate reaction was that, like I definitely did not know how to handle that type of scenario. I did not know how to navigate the intense fear that I felt after that moment. After my divorce, like before it was clear that we were going to break up, before anybody even knew, we had these thank you notes that hadn't even gone out to people in our lives. There was all of these pictures of me in a big puffy dress and all of these images of this day of these theoretical dreams coming true. And at the time, of course, I felt humiliated. I felt completely humiliated. And it was torture for me to write those notes and feel like every single one of them was a lie, and feel like I didn't know how to just tell the truth. And it's not that I wanted to lie. There's no part of me that wanted to lie. I stink at lying. I can't lie. But I didn't know what to do in that scenario. And because of this acute pain that I felt around this particular split, it motivated me to do my first ceremony. My intention in this ceremony also was to figure this out, was to find, was to see, was to heal whatever it was that I was missing around this and love relationships. So I go into ceremony, and by the way, it's terrifying because you know you're going to see yourself deeply. It's one of the bravest things I've ever done, is to be willing to see myself and to look that deeply into myself, to feel the pain that comes out when you're in those kinds of ceremonial healing experiences. And I'm in no way an expert on this stuff, so This is all very much from my own personal experience. I don't recommend anybody do anything. It's, anything, certainly anything illegal or anything like that. Do all your own research and definitely make sure you're safe. All of that I had done for myself. And so I knew I was in a safe place and safe space and safely held with these people. So I'm sitting there and gosh, I'm feeling sort of ill. I'm feeling ill. And I start to just like make these noises. Just like, just like, oh my God. I almost feel sick thinking about it. I am letting myself make these sounds. And this one particular sound was nasty and loud. Every time I made that particular sound, I purged. And it was really intense. It was unfucking believable. I don't know how else to say it. Literally, one of the main things I kept saying about this particular ceremony was, it's unfucking believable. Holy fucking shitballs. But anyway, I started to speak. I started to say no. And I said no, like with deliberate direction, just no. But where I'm going is one story in particular stuck out. And I remembered this story. This was a story that was not buried in my unconscious. It was conscious to me. Where I remember I was in 8th grade and I went to a high school dance. Went to the dance. I was excited to be there. And, there's this high school dance. There's the dark lights of the gym and the bad high school DJ, all that. And, you're sitting on the lowest seat of the bleachers and you're hoping that some boy asks you to dance. Oh my God, the hottest, cutest senior boy comes over and asks me to dance. And I am just swooning. Oh, I am just over the moon that I am dancing with this. I can't even believe it's real. I'm just like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm not saying any of this, obviously. I'm just awkwardly dancing with this person. But I was over the moon. Then, after the dance, we're back in school and the yearbooks come out. And it's kind of weird, but all the senior guys wanted to sign my yearbook. They were asking me if they could sign my yearbook. And I was like, okay, cool. And I gave it to them. They signed it. And it was weird because pretty much all of them were writing these sort of lovey notes, these really sort of just love notes to me in my yearbook. And I don't remember if I don't remember if I
I don't remember if this happened or if I just thought it was happening. But basically, it hit me that I was a joke, that these love notes, that this person asking me to dance was all a part of a big joke, that they were all just making fun of me. And I got, like, I don't remember feeling humiliated. But in ceremony, I got it like, well, fuck, of course. Of course you're afraid. Of course you know. Like, of course you would want to know what every man in your life is thinking. Of course you would need to be reassured. Of course any hint of anything off would make you fear that same humiliation. And so seeing that, I was able to really heal it and to be like, oh, I don't have to know everything. I can't possibly know everything. I can't possibly predict what any person in my life is going to do, how any person might treat me, what they might say, how they might show up in my life one day and then totally changed in another. I finally was able to be like, I don't need to be afraid of that anymore. And it seems so simple, but the profound healing that I got, no longer fearing that I would be humiliated, was huge. Oh my God. I sort of feel like I want to go tell some of my professional story because it's interesting how that lack of awareness in terms of how I was limited by that fear manifested in my life and in what I did as an individual and in my professional life. So my dad is a pilot. He has been in aviation my whole life. And he and one of his best friends started a drop zone, a skydiving center at our house when I was, I can't remember how old I was, honestly. It's probably 10 or 12 or something like that. I got to see skydivers. I got to see people jumping out of airplanes and having this really fun, amazing experience, and just seeing the freedom and the fun that was embodied in these people that were there. And I was just, a drop zone kid, just kind of there. I would sit through the first jump course. I would get in the hanging harness and pull handles. One day when I was 18, I just got sick of waiting. Like, I kind of got sick of feeling anxious. And I basically said to myself, all right, that's it. Tomorrow, I'm doing it. Now, for me, I was jumping out of a small Cessna where it's only a few people fit in it. My dad's actually the pilot. I was actually the pilot on my first jump. And so I climb in. I'm sitting on the floor, and I've been in this airplane many times, so this part isn't new to me. But what is new to me is that I'm wearing a skydiving rig, and I'm sitting on the ground, and they close the door, and we start to taxi for the runway. We get to the end of the runway, And my dad revs the engine, checks the airplane, and we go. You sort of feel the lurch of the airplane start to move for takeoff. We're rolling down the runway, and the airplane takes off. Again, I've been here before. This is not new to me. I've been in the airplane many times. But this time is different because we're climbing to altitude for me to actually leave this aircraft. And so we're climbing, and I'm trying to breathe. My goggles are fogging up. I'm trying not to freak out. I'm checking my altimeter, looking at my altitude, seeing how far we are before we get there. We get up to jump run. The airplane, you can feel the airplane level off. So you know that you're not climbing anymore. So you know that you're getting closer and closer to exit. So the plane levels off, and I know that we're on jump run. My instructor checks my gear, makes sure I'm good to go. He reaches across my body, twists the handle of the door, and let's go. And the door flings open, and it is windy, it's loud, and we're at 5,000 feet, and there's nothing between me and the ground. And that's the first time I have ever seen this. I am sitting, literally sitting right next to an open aircraft door in flight. It's so intense. It's so comically intense. But I'm ready. You know, I'm committed. I'm committed. I'm ready. I want to do this. Even though I am terrified, I do what my instructor says, okay, gives me the thumbs up. And I'm like, okay. I swing my legs out into the wind, and I reach out the forward. It's like when you stick your head out of a moving car. It's the same sort of vibe. And I'm leaning out into that wind to put my hands on the strut of the airplane, which is basically that beam that holds the wing up, that holds it, connects to the fuselage of the aircraft and to the wing of the aircraft to keep it stable. And so that is what I'm reaching out to grab onto. That's what I'm supposed to hang off of before I let go. And so I'm reaching out into this wind. I sort of scoop my butt toward the door so that I can, kind of, when it's time, hop out. I reach out, I'm out there, I look back at my instructor, and he's like, okay, like, it's time to go. And so I've scooted my butt all the way close to the edge, and I look out, I have my hands on the strut, and I just push off, and I just hop out. And I immediately fall off the strut. I wasn't able to hang on the strut. I just fell off. And in 3 seconds, I had a parachute over my head because I was doing a static line jump. So I didn't have to pull a ripcord or anything like that. But, oh my God, absolutely, absolutely exhilarating. I don't even know what that word means. You know what I mean? But just like flooded. My whole body was flooded in an amazing way. And now I'm in this environment, this experience where I'm like, okay, I gotta fly this thing now. I gotta reach up. I gotta pull my brakes down. Is it good? Do I have an emergency on my hands? Is this a landable parachute? And luckily on my first jump, I had a very good parachute. And I fly it all the way down, and I come in, and on my very first jump, I landed right in my dad's backyard, and I just slid in on my butt, and I just laid there, just fully and completely changed. It's indescribable. There's nothing like it. To leave an aircraft in flight, to open a parachute, and to land it of your own power. It boggles my mind even still today. I mean, it was basically that when I jumped and when I landed and I was not dead, and it sounds so ridiculous, it changed my psyche in a really irreversible way. Anytime I feel fear, or anytime my fear is trying to tell me I can't do something, it's not like some fucking life coachy, you can do anything, like it's totally not that. It's that anytime my fear is telling me I can't do something, I have to at least question whether or not that's true. That premise alone has served me in every single area of my life, in the sense that I wouldn't be a professional skydiver. I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. I wouldn't be a writer. I certainly wouldn't be on this show talking in great depths and personal soul-bearing storytelling, which is, oh God, such medicine. God, I love what you guys do with this show. Oh gosh. I could cry thinking about this. Oh, man. It's such gratitude, guys. I have so much gratitude. Wow. That's amazing to feel that even now. 23 years in, 11,000 plus jumps in, I still feel such immense gratitude for the influence of skydiving in my life. And it's partly connected to how it helped free me from the chains of fear. Anyway, there's a lot there. What else would you like to know?
Welcome back. Dr. G here again. What you just heard was live tape from Mel's world record-breaking jump when she and the Project 19 crew pulled off an unprecedented 80-way skydiver jump. Truly, superhumans exist in all facets of life. Understanding our relationship with fear can be complicated and scary in its own right. Simply recognizing the existence of fear in your life makes you superhuman. We want to thank Mel for her willingness to be vulnerable with herself, with us, and with all of you. Her story reminds us that fear has the power to take us away from our greatest self, but that we have the power to override it, ultimately changing the course of the life we have left to live. When we think about breaking the chains of fear, we are invited not only to make change, but to see fear, look it in the face, and say what Mel said: no.
No. No. No.
You can learn more about Mel in our show notes. But we can't let you go without first sharing this and bragging on her behalf. Since that first jump, Melanie Curtis has done over 11,000 jumps. She's a world record holder, national champion, author, speaker, coach, and entrepreneur. Imagine how one move can lead you to 11,000 more thrilling, life-fulfilling moments. My co-creator and co-producer, Pamela Rothenberg, wants to invite you into a mini meditation. This is something we do behind the scenes to create a safe space for our storytellers as they open up.
Hey everyone, we want to thank you for taking the time to listen with us. When Dr. G and I think about the purpose of this show, it has so many layers. And we think about you. Every step of the way, we think about you. We think about your experience of the story and how it's going to land in you. We think about what it's going to shift and what questions it's going to bring up. So we want to offer you the kind of guided meditation that we offer to our storytellers. And before we get into it, I just want to make sure that if you choose to receive this meditation and to go along with us, that you're in a safe, comfortable space to do so. As in, not operating any heavy machinery and not driving. And if it feels comfortable and safe for you, I'll begin. Take a moment to notice where you are in space. Begin to become aware of your body. And as this awareness comes to you, I invite you to see if you can find a way to become 10% more comfortable. Be it in your seat or wherever you stand now. Maybe you're lying down. And take this moment to nurture you and cater to you. And as you find yourself in this space that is just a little bit more comfortable, I invite you to bring your awareness to the bottom of your feet. And notice what's holding you from the ground level. Notice what is supporting you. Breathe into that. Just gently, with no need to force anything. Just allowing yourself to notice what is holding you. And as you enter more deeply into this space, I invite you again to put your attention toward the bottom of your feet and the relationship between the soles of your feet and the ground below you, or the space around them. And as you tune in, go ahead and bring your awareness, navigate your awareness to the top of your head. holding both poles at the same time, that which is below you and that which is above you. Bring your awareness to your existence in between. Breathing deeply into your heart space. Noticing the energy of anything that doesn't support you in this moment, gently leaving. I invite you to bring your awareness now to the back of your head and the space behind you. And if you're lying down, again, noticing that which is holding you. If you're seated, noticing that which is holding you. And if you're standing, noticing that which circles around you. Tuning into the present moment. I invite you to notice your hands, to notice if they can soften. Notice if there's any part of you that wants to move now that it's entered the stillness. Invite yourself to do so. Allowing any energy to gently fall away with any of these small movements. And giving yourself a moment just to be here, to be present, to notice what's arising for you. And one of the things that we do with Superhumans is carve out one particular question individualized for our storyteller. And I want you to notice if your consciousness has a question for you, something supportive for you. And I want you to invite yourself to put this question in your heart, to allow it to be something that guides you. Bring your awareness now to your throat. Notice if any piece of it feels blocked or constricted. Can you offer yourself a little tenderness for the truth that wants to be revealed to you in this particular moment, in this container, with yourself, in the privacy of your own presence? And then notice your relationship to your spine. Notice if it is communicating anything to you. Knowing that in a way the spine is deeply connected to the soul and divine intelligence. Notice if there's any secret that your individual temple is hoping to communicate to you. And if it feels safer to move away from the communication, you're also welcome to sit in the simplicity of silence. You're also welcome to sit in the simplicity of this nothingness. You're invited to pause, to continue to play, to rest, to roll back. When you're ready, I invite you to bring your awareness to your toes and wiggle them a little bit, welcoming yourself out of this space, out of this container. And for those of you who are ready, when you're ready, you can begin to move your shoulders a little bit, or roll whatever feels like it needs to be rolled or wiggled or moved, with no rush, maintaining presence, deepening your connection to yourself. My prayer for you as you leave this meditation is that you know that this space is always available for you. Cultivated in connection with your presence, and your willingness to be here with you. And as you continue to come back to this new space, to wherever you are, you can open your eyes. My prayer also, my hope also, is that you closed your eyes earlier. I forgot to give that permission. And hopefully we all guided ourselves there. So allowing yourself to gently open your eyes and flutter them open and blink a few times and gain consciousness. And gain consciousness of where we are now, having moved from wherever we were before, having moved to this new space, this new world, with this presence and this part of you. Dr. G and I want to thank you for taking this time to be with yourself and taking this time to be with our storyteller and with Superhumans.
Normally, this is where we tease our next episode. But instead, we want to hear from you. What themes or topics are you hoping we feature next? Or maybe you have a story that you want to tell, or know of someone who is superhuman. Just send us a note at hello@wellplayed.health. That's hello@wellplayed.health. We're already inspired to hear from you. This episode was kindly supported by an educational grant from our friends at Daiichi Sankyo. Without you, this would not be possible. We share in our values an unrelenting commitment to human life. If you, our listeners, share in similar values and want to explore the power of sponsoring our docuseries, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We want to thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't yet, we'd be so thankful if you could leave us a review to help new listeners discover how story can be a form of medicine. Superhumans is made with love by a tribe of creative artists. Our senior producer and show co-creator is Pamela Rothenberg. Sound engineering and design is provided by Rob Spate. Pre-production audio engineering is provided by Jay Woojun Yao. Our original theme music is composed by Daniel Brunel. And a special thanks to our creative collaborators, Hatch. From Well Played, I'm Dr. G, and you are loved.